My 27th birthday was supposed to be simple. I wasn't expecting a grand celebration, or gifts wrapped in shiny paper, or even a cake. I just expected a quiet evening with the people I had lived with my whole life, my mother, my stepfather, and my stepsiblings. For years, I had been told that family meant support, loyalty, and unconditional love. I believed it, held onto it, defended it when others warned me they weren't good people. I thought they could never hurt me more than life already had. I was wrong. When I walked into the living room that morning, they were all sitting there waiting for me. No smiles, no greetings, no birthday wishes. Just blank faces and a thick envelope sitting on the coffee table. My stepfather slid it toward me with the coldness of a landlord handing out bills. "We need to talk," he said. I knew instantly that nothing good ever followed those 4 words. Still, I sat down, heart tightening inside my chest. My mother didn't look up. Every time I tried to meet her eyes, she stared at the floor instead. That was my first clue. The second came when my stepsister crossed her arms and smirked like she already won something I didn't know I was losing. My stepfather gestured toward the envelope. "Read it." My hands shook as I opened it. The paper inside was crisp, freshly printed. But the words, they felt like they were carved into stone. Notice of eviction. The lease under my name was being terminated. 30 days to pack up and leave. No explanation. No warning. No kindness. I looked up, confused, betrayed. Is this some kind of joke? Today, on my birthday, my stepfather didn't flinch. "You're an adult now. You should be living on your own. We've done enough." My throat tightened. I pay rent. I help with bills. I cover groceries half the time. My stepsister scoffed. "Yeah, but you're dead weight. You should have moved out years ago." My brother chimed in from the couch. "Dad wants my gaming room expanded. We need your space." Of course. There it was. The real reason. Not responsibility, not independence, just convenience. They wanted my room. They wanted me gone. And they chose my birthday to deliver the message. My mother still didn't speak. Her silence was worse than the cruelty dripping from the others. She finally lifted her gaze, but instead of apology, I saw fear, fear of upsetting her husband, fear of losing comfort, fear of choosing me. She had always been that way. Choosing the easiest path, not the right one. I stood up slowly, the eviction notice clutched in my hand. "You could have talked to me. You could have told me earlier. You could have said anything besides this, today of all days." My stepfather shrugged. "Life isn't about special days. It's about decisions. And our decision is final." My stepsister laughed. "Happy birthday, I guess." The room spun for a moment. My birthday, the one day that should have had a small flicker of warmth, had turned into ash in my hands. I walked to my room, closed the door, and let the silence swallow me. I wasn't angry yet. No, anger came later. First came disbelief. Then grief. Then a feeling much colder, detachment. Something inside me snapped that day, not like a brittle twig but like a chain that had held me down for too long. I sat on my bed staring at the eviction notice. Their words echoed in my head. "Dead weight. We need your space. We've done enough." Every sentence replayed, feeding something dark, something fierce inside me. They thought I was weak, someone who would cry, beg, and leave quietly. Someone who would vanish without protest. They thought pushing me out would be easy. They had no idea who I was becoming in that moment. My phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. Birthday messages from friends. People who remembered me even when they had no obligation to. People who cared. People who weren't tied to me by blood but by choice. I grabbed my jacket, walked past the living room without saying a single word, and stepped outside. As soon as I got into my car, everything hit me: years of being the outsider, years of doing chores my siblings refused, years of being blamed for things I never did, years of my mother choosing silence over protection. I gripped the steering wheel and breathed. Slow, deep, steady. Rage burned under my skin, but not the kind that made me reckless. It was the kind that sharpened the mind, the kind that made you plan, the kind that whispered, "Fight back." I drove until the city blurred. I parked near the river, the place I always went when life became too loud. The water was calm, reflecting the fading daylight. I sat there until the sun dipped behind the horizon, my thoughts settling like dust after a storm. They wanted me gone. Fine. I would leave, but not quietly, not broken, not defeated. A sudden idea sparked, a plan that first felt impossible, then thrilling, then absolutely necessary. Everything they owned, everything they relied on, everything they took pride in, it all had cracks. Cracks I knew better than anyone. Their finances, their debts, the house's legalities, the business my stepfather ran, the land ownership tied to it. Years of listening quietly had given me information they never imagined I would use. They expected me to walk away with nothing. They expected me to lose. But I wasn't going to lose. I was going to rise. And I was going to make sure every single one of them understood exactly what it meant to push away someone who had spent years giving everything and receiving nothing. By the time I drove back home late that night, I wasn't the same person. That soft, forgiving version of me had died the moment they handed me that envelope. A new version walked through the door, calm, dangerous, unrecognizable even to myself. They didn't look at me when I passed them. They probably thought I spent the day crying. They probably felt proud. They had no idea the storm they had just created. As I lay down in bed, staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, "You're not evicting me from your home. You're releasing me from your control." And the moment I realized that, I smiled for the first time that day. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The first night in my car was colder than I expected. I curled up in the back seat, my birthday cake smashed in its box beside me, and stared at the ceiling through tears that refused to stop. Every memory replayed in my head, my mother's icy expression, my father avoiding my eyes, my siblings smirking as if throwing me out was some kind of family game. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong, but deep down, I knew the answer. I existed. I wasn't their favorite. I wasn't their golden child. I was simply the easiest one to sacrifice. And that thought fueled something inside me, anger, determination, and a hunger to prove that their cruelty wouldn't break me. The next morning, I started by listing everything I still had: my car, my backpack, my laptop, and the small savings in my bank account. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a restart. I used a gas station bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth, then sat in my car searching for job postings. By noon, I had secured an interview for a position at a local print shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I stepped into the shop, trying to hide the fact that my entire life was currently stuffed in my trunk. The manager, Mrs. Dalton, was an older woman with kind eyes who immediately noticed the exhaustion I tried to mask. "You look like someone who's been through a storm," she said softly. I managed a smile. "Something like that." "Well," she said, scanning my resume, "your experience is strong, and you seem determined. I like that. You can start tomorrow." Just like that, I had a job. It wasn't miracles or luck, it was survival kicking in. That night, instead of sleeping in my car again, I rented a small room behind a cafe, barely big enough for a bed and a desk. The landlord didn't ask many questions, and I didn't offer any answers. For the first time, I felt a tiny spark of independence. Still, I couldn't shake the pain of being unwanted by the people who were supposed to love me the most. Over the next weeks, I threw myself into work. I arrived early, stayed late, learned everything I could, from graphic design basics to how the machines operated. Mrs. Dalton noticed my drive and often brought me coffee or sandwiches. "You remind me of myself when I started this place," she'd say, smiling warmly. Her kindness kept me going on days that felt too heavy. One afternoon, she handed me an envelope. "Your first bonus," she said. When I stared at her in disbelief, she added, "Hard workers deserve recognition." That money helped me upgrade my laptop and take online classes in design, advertising, and branding. My skills grew quickly. Soon, customers began requesting my work personally. Word spread that I was talented, creative, and reliable. Business increased, and Mrs. Dalton constantly praised me for changing the rhythm of the shop. But life had a funny way of bringing the past back when you least expect it. One evening, while working on a rush order for a corporate event, I heard a familiar voice behind me, a voice that made my stomach tighten. I turned and saw my older brother, Sean, standing with two coworkers. He looked shocked when his eyes met mine, while I simply kept my expression calm. "You work here," he blurted out, as if the idea offended him. "For now," I replied, returning to my design. "How can I help you?" He hesitated before awkwardly placing a stack of papers on the counter. "We need invitations printed for our company launch. Dad's new project." Of course it was my father's. Even though they threw me out, he continued expanding his business with the children he actually cared about. I felt an old wound reopen but refused to let it show. I took the order, worked on it with perfection, and delivered it without a single word of emotion. When Sean picked it up, he stared at me for a long moment. "You look different," he said quietly. "I am different," I replied simply, then walked away. Weeks passed, and the shop continued to grow. One day, Mrs. Dalton called me into her office. I want to retire, she said gently. And I want you to take over the business. I froze. Me, I've watched you rebuild yourself piece by piece, she said. You're smart, talented, and your heart is in this place. I want it to go to someone who deserves it. Tears stung my eyes, but this time, they weren't from pain, they were from gratitude. We worked out a payment plan that I could manage, and within months, I officially became the owner of Dalton Print and Design. Overnight, I went from being evicted to becoming a small business owner. It felt surreal, but that was only the beginning. With renewed energy, I rebranded the shop, expanded services, and partnered with local businesses, influencers, and online clients. The store grew so fast people began calling it the best creative studio in the city. Money flowed in, customers lined up, and my name started circulating in circles I never imagined. Then came the day destiny knocked again. I received an email from a large corporation wanting me to design branding for their new luxury product line. When I saw the company name, my heart skipped a beat. My father's company. Their design team had failed twice, and they were looking for external experts. They didn't know that the expert they were reaching out to was the daughter they had abandoned. I agreed to the meeting. Walking into the company's glass building felt like stepping into a past life. My father, mother, and siblings sat at the long conference table, waiting for the designer they had heard so much about. When I walked in, their eyes widened in shock. My father stood up suddenly. What are you doing here? I calmly placed my portfolio on the table. You asked for the best. So here I am. I didn't shake, didn't show anger, didn't show fear. I was no longer the girl they threw out, I was someone they needed now, someone they could no longer control. Their silence tasted like victory. And as I began presenting my ideas, I realized this was only the start of my fight back, the quiet kind, the powerful kind, the kind they never saw coming. The silence in the conference room stretched so long that even the air felt heavy. My family sat frozen, as if they couldn't accept the reality in front of them. The daughter they had tossed aside like a piece of trash was now standing in their multi-million-dollar office as the owner of one of the most successful branding studios in the city. I took my time setting up my presentation, clicking through slides with confidence I once believed I would never possess. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, calm, and completely in control. This is the direction I've created for your luxury line, I said, shifting through the designs. Clean, modern, timeless. It aligns with your market and elevates your brand image. My father watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between shock and disbelief. My mother looked down at her hands, guilt flickering across her face. My siblings, who had laughed when I was thrown out, looked uncomfortable now. They recognized what this meant. I wasn't weak anymore. I had risen without them. And now, they needed me. When I finished, there was a long pause. My father finally cleared his throat. Your work is impressive, he said slowly. Very impressive. I nodded. Thank you. We'd like to hire your company for the full campaign, he continued, sounding almost forced. I met his eyes. My schedule is full. I can only take the project if the contract terms meet my standards. His jaw tightened. The power dynamic had flipped entirely, and everyone in the room felt it. My brother tried to smile. Come on, he said lightly. It's us. Family. I closed my laptop. The same family that handed me an eviction notice on my birthday. My mother winced. My father shifted in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table. We made a mistake, he admitted, the words stiff and unnatural. Things were stressful then. No, I said softly. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And so did I. The truth hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. My father exhaled. Let's move forward. Business is business. And in business, I replied, you don't get special treatment just because you share DNA with someone. After a moment of tense silence, he finally agreed to my contract terms, terms that heavily favored my company. I walked out of that building feeling taller than I ever had before. Every step felt like reclaiming pieces of myself they tried to break. But the real revenge wasn't the contract. It came later. The campaign turned out to be the most successful launch their company had ever seen. My work raised their market value. Social media exploded with praise for the new branding. Industry magazines highlighted the creative direction, and all credit came to me in my studio. My name now carried weight, more than my father ever expected. He called me into his office a month later. His tone was less commanding now, more hesitant. I'd like you to join the company as our creative director, he said. We could use your vision. I felt an old, familiar ache in my chest, one last shard of the girl who once wanted nothing more than her father's approval. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I appreciate the offer, I said. But I'm not interested in working under anyone again. Especially not here. He tried again. You'd have a high salary. Full authority. A leadership position. I already have full authority, I answered. In my own company. His jaw tightened, pride battling with desperation. We're offering you a place in the family business. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the same man who had watched me walk out with nothing, not even caring where I would sleep that night. The same man who had let my siblings mock me while I stood holding an eviction notice with shaking hands. And now he wanted me back only because he saw the value I brought. No, I said gently but firmly. I don't want a place in your business. I built my own. For a moment, he seemed to age 10 years right in front of me. His shoulders dropped slightly, and the proud, unshakable man I knew looked suddenly human, fragile even. But it didn't change anything. Not anymore. Over the next few months, the distance between us grew wider. My siblings sent messages here and there, trying to reconnect, but I didn't respond. They wanted access, not reconciliation. My mother sent a birthday gift that year, a quiet apology wrapped in pretty paper, but it couldn't erase the memory of her turning her back on me when I needed her most. My life, on the other hand, kept expanding. I opened a second studio across town, then a third. Clients lined up months in advance, and I hired a team of designers who admired my journey. I built a world for myself, one filled with purpose, success, and people who valued me for who I was. One evening, after locking up the studio, I drove past my old house. The lights were on, and laughter drifted from the windows. For a moment, I wondered if they would open the door for me now, if they would greet me with smiles instead of eviction papers. But then I realized something important: whether they would or not no longer mattered. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't about destroying them or watching them fall. My revenge was living the life they never believed I could have. My revenge was becoming someone without them, someone stronger, wiser, happier. I drove away without stopping. The next morning, I woke up in my own apartment, sunlight streaming across the room, my phone buzzing with new clients and opportunities. And for the first time in my life, I felt something that no family, no money, no apology could ever give me. Peace. Not because they changed, but because I did. And that was the greatest revenge of all.